The real estate bill is going to be a reality in this budget session itself. Government policy is to encourage private people also in a big way. And we are happy that they are also playing an important role. They are also equal partners in the development of the country. But they have to follow certain regulations. And they have to really, if they want to enhance their own credibility, they have to fulfill the conditions that they themselves are announcing.
It's been a big week with Parliament approving the Real Estate Regulatory Authority Bill. 10 years after it was first envisaged, India's watchdog for the real estate sector is now a reality. Hello and welcome to Prime Property, your weekly real estate reckoner. I'm Nayantara Rai. Before we go any further, let's recap the top highlights of the Real Estate Regulatory Bill. The regulator is going to regulate residential and commercial properties, is going to regulate consumers, builders as well as brokers. No project launch will be allowed until builders get all the government approvals and register those projects with the regulator. 70% of the customer advance will have to be kept by the builders in a separate escrow account, and that's to ensure project delivery. There's a clear definition of carpet area, and builders are being told to quote prices on the basis of the carpet area. The bill also says there should be the same rate of penalty interest for both builders and buyers for project delays and late payments. Penalties on builders for project delays, up to 3-year imprisonment for builders for repeated violations, and maximum 1-year imprisonment for home buyers for registering false cases. Builders will have to return payment with interest for false advertising. The onus is now on the states to adopt this model legislation and set up regulatory bodies. To get more details on what all of this means for you, the consumers, I reached out to someone who was involved in the drafting of the legislation that has been approved by Parliament. Here's my conversation with Rajya Sabha MP Rajiv Chandrasekhar. Listen in. Thanks, Mr. Chandrasekhar, for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. It's a red letter day for home buyers, for consumers of commercial real estate, and for the real estate sector at large. This bill should bring transparency, the much needed transparency in the property market. I want to first begin by asking you, what according to you are the 3 biggest factors in this bill that will ensure transparency and ensure empowerment for consumers?
So there's more than 3, but let me tell you that, one is of course the fact that there is now a regulator that will adjudicate disputes. Second is that the bill clearly lays out the obligations on part of the builder to the consumer and the consumer's rights, whether it is carpet area, whether it is time of delivery, whether it is the after sales repair support that the builder has to deliver to the buyer. And then the most important thing is the builder has to register his project and has to get a green light before he can start marketing it, and the green light is given only after he gets all the approvals that he requires to start building and therefore marketing his project. The big difference here is of course that builders used to market it as soon as they had a piece of land, and consumers took essentially the risk of the builders getting all their approvals.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, one thing I want to ask you, and I ask you this because you were a major part of the select committee as far as this bill goes. Why did all of you decide not to bring in any government agency, any state government agency, municipality into the ambit of this bill, any state housing board? There is no onus on any government department to provide timely approvals. That's going to continue leading to project delays. Why didn't you do that?
No, look, there are 2 things here that we must understand. One is that this is a law passed by the Union of India, the Parliament of India, and it cannot trespass into the laws and the rights and the administrative rights of the sovereign state. I mean, not the sovereign state, but the state government or the municipal body. So for a law to start bringing an urban local body under its ambit, or for a central law to start bringing a state government of its ambit, is purely not workable. It's just constitutionally unsustainable. Point number 1. Point number 2, understand what this bill is trying to do. It is trying to restructure and reform a sector. And that sector has, as you correctly point out, many stakeholders and many participants and many people who impact what gets done. And at the bottom of the pyramid is the municipal bodies and those planning authorities and those planning boards and the state governments. Now, what this bill does is start giving the consumers of India a serious voice, and therefore the required pressure for the state governments and the municipal bodies also to start getting their act together and reforming. Point number one. Point number two, what it does in absolute terms also is, says the builder now takes the entire risk, the entire onus and responsibility of the planning approvals. Now, if the builder is building a project in a place where there is a lot of corruption, a lot of delays, a lot of lethargy for getting approvals, he just has to go through that process and then only bring the consumer into the picture.
So are you saying it was not possible for any central bill to actually try and address and break the alleged Babu Builder nexus?
No, it is not, because the Babu Builder nexus or the municipal council builder nexus or the local state minister builder nexus is not something that can be broken from Delhi. It has to be broken by ensuring transparency in local laws. Now, for example, I come from Bengaluru and everybody knows there's rampant corruption. There is a nexus between builders and state politicians. That everybody knows that. Now, that can't be regulated by a law passed here, but it can be regulated, it can be changed by putting the citizens of Bengaluru and the citizens of Karnataka putting pressure on the state government saying, we want similar transparency, we want a regulatory body to be formed in Karnataka which will give us the similar kinds of protection and rights that is in the central law. So, and if you heard what Mr. Venkaiah Naidu said, he said along with this bill, his urban development ministry will now enact model guidelines, model zoning and planning guidelines, model building codes, and send this all off to various local bodies and various state governments. And it is for those state governments to either ignore them, or if the people of that state or that city put pressure on them, adopt them.
Okay, so you're saying the efforts will still be on to try and break that Babu Builder nexus, not just with maybe this bill. Mr. Chandrasekhar, the other thing I want to ask you about is the contentious lock-in. You know, we first saw it at 70%, then it was diluted to 50%, it's again at 70%. What has been the rationale behind this escrow account? Obviously, builders are unhappy. Home buyers feel that it's a great move. Their money is not going to be diverted. But do you think perhaps they should embrace the idea that property prices could go up since builders will lose fungibility of money?
Narendra, if you saw my speech in Parliament, I said, and this is my philosophy and ideology, I would have preferred some of these things not to have been hard-coded in law. I would have preferred leaving these to the regulator because different cities have different economic dynamics. Land in some cities is a very significant part of the project. Some parts of the project, the land is a smaller component of the overall project. So, the economics of various cities and various places differ. So, I would have preferred this to be in the rules that could have been amended or rules that could have been geography specific. But let's go to why this is necessary. The big reason for this, and as the Select Committee toured the entire country, met stakeholders from all over this country, it is very clear that there is a huge trust deficit between the builder and his customer. And the customer today, the real estate sector, and they really need to do some introspection. I have never dealt with or been exposed to an industry that is as hated by its customers, as hated by its principal customers and stakeholder, the consumer, as the real estate industry is. And it is that trust deficit that is causing the government and the political class to say, we have to move the balance of power to the consumer. Even if it does sound like it is a little bit too harsh on the builder, the balance of power, the balance of favor is now going in favor of the consumer.
And on that note, we have to take a short commercial break. We're going to be back in a few moments to carry on this conversation with Rajiv Chandrasekhar. I plan to ask him how this bill protects consumers from project delays. Stay tuned to find out.